The beginning of the 14th century saw considerable political disruption and confusion in South India and the Deccan. This resulted from the repeated attacks of the Khalji and Tughlaq dynasties from the north. Out of the chaos, the sons of a chieftain named Sangama built a new and powerful kingdom named Vijayanagara, or City of Victory. Its magnificent capital was at Hampi, a sacred site with a long history in present-day Karnataka. It is a picturesque landscape on the banks of the Tungabhadra river, with large boulders strewn across it. It is against this setting that the historic drama of this great kingdom unfolded. At its height, it controlled the whole Deccan and South India, and included the former territories of the Chalukyas and the Cholas. The Vijayanagara kingdom remained powerful till the middle of the 16th century and continued in a weakened state till the early 18th century. In this period, Islamic sultanates, first the Bahmanis and later others, had formed in the Deccan. These sultanates remained at constant war with Vijayanagara. However, that did not prevent the interaction of cultures which took place. Devaraya II of Vijayanagara kept thousands of Muslim soldiers in his army. He gave a high status to the Quran and donations for the building of mosques. A vibrant culture was created in Vijayanagara. The capital city of Hampi is one of the most celebrated metropolises of medieval India. During its days of glory, it had few equals anywhere in the world. From the 14th to the 16th centuries, Hampi was one of the most prosperous cities in the world. People of different countries rubbed shoulders with each other in marketplaces here. Portuguese merchants brought the best horses from Arabia. Diamonds came here from Golconda, and textiles and spices flowed here from all corners. This was one of the most thriving and cosmopolitan places in the world. Under the enlightened rule of Krishna Devaraya in the 16th century, the empire rose to its zenith and drew appreciation from travellers around the world. A Portuguese traveller, Barbosa, wrote, "The king allows such freedom that every man may come and go and live according to his own creed, without suffering any annoyance and without inquiring whether he is a Christian, Jew, Moor or heathen. Great equity and justice is observed to all, not only by the ruler, but by the people to one another." This continued the remarkably cosmopolitan culture seen in the Indian subcontinent since earliest time. The Persian visitor of the 15th century, Abdur Razak, wrote about the city that the pupil of the eye has never seen a place like it, and the ear of intelligence has never been informed that there existed anything equal to it in the world. Portuguese visitors in the 16th century found Hampi to be like a second paradise, with no equal in the world then. The Vijayanagara kings rebuilt the Virupaksha Temple in the early 15th century, at a site which had been venerated since ancient times. The main gateway or gopura rises to about 170 feet. It is the largest gopura built at Vijayanagara and a fine example of late South Indian or Dravidian gateways. The chariot street in front of the temple was also known as a bazaar and must have been one of the busiest in the world in its time. In the palace complex is a massive stone basement, which is what remains of a large structure called the Minami Dibba. The Portuguese traveller Pays records that it was erected to mark Krishna Deva Raya's victorious military campaign in Orissa. Originally, there would have been a gorgeously decorated pillared hall or a many-storied pavilion on this platform. It is here that the king celebrated the 9 days of the Mahanavami festival, which marks the victory of Durga over Mahishasura, the conquest of knowledge over the confusion of ignorance. This was the occasion when kings used to review the armies and check the preparedness for battle. The spectacular celebrations and parades left a deep impression upon foreign visitors, who have described them in great detail. There are reliefs made on the side of the Dibba, which show the great processions which took place. The king's great armies are shown, and so are hunters and dancers. Portuguese merchants are shown displaying to royal figures the well-bred horses which they brought from Arabia. The coats, trousers, hats, beards, and upward-turned moustaches of the foreigners are keenly observed and represented by the artists. The different body postures and movements of Europeans have also been effectively portrayed. It is a marvelous depiction of the festivities and the life of the times. We also see many details of the local costumes and musical instruments then. Unlike the art of ancient times, the focus is here on life in the world, the here and now. The carvings are full of vigor and expression. There is an immediacy and zest in the figures.
It's interesting, we have a 16th century Portuguese description of a temple festival in the Deccan, a Portuguese merchant who was visiting the Vijayanagara Empire, and he recorded in his memoirs that he saw a temple procession passing through the streets of the town and led by a company of dancing women. These almost certainly would have been Devadasi. The making of music and dance in the temple context is very much to do both with celebrating the god, but also entertaining the god. And this is part of the role of those who are providers and servants of the god of the temple, that they should meet the daily needs of the deity. They provide food, bathe the deity, dress the deity, and provide, recite prayers and offer entertainment for the god's pleasure.
While the subject of most ancient sculptures and friezes was the divine, here it is the royal themes which occupy the artist. In the early reliefs at Vijayanagara, the sculptor has used a simple style, without foreshortening or perspective. This seems to derive from hero stones of the folk art traditions, which were made to celebrate great deeds. As in the earlier memorial stones, the men and women are made with robust bodies. Quite often, they are seen gesticulating. Physical power and an expressive quality are typical of early Vijayanagara art. This period is characterized by long bands of narratives made in shallow relief. The effect is pictorial rather than sculptural, and these are reminiscent of the format which paintings were beginning to take in this period. Granite, which was quarried at the site itself, is the medium out of which these were carved. However, they were covered with a fine plaster and were painted. Some plaster which remains on parapets and gateways displays the quality of the original workmanship. This is the first time in India that royal pavilions were made with basements of stone. Previously, all palaces were made of ephemeral materials. The permanence of stone was reserved for structures dedicated to that which was eternal, beyond the illusory and passing personalities of the material world. Here, in this time, we see significant changes taking place. There are a large number of palace structures and pleasure pavilions which survive at Hampi. The Chandra temple was most probably made towards the end of the 15th century and added to in the 16th century. The enclosure wall of the temple continues the themes seen in the friezes of the Mahanavami Dibba. The carvings here are finely finished and have a more controlled and formal presentation than the earlier ones. The liveliness of the Dibba carvings is not found here in this courtly style. The lowest panel shows elephants. The second has horses with grooms, and the third has parading soldiers. Above these are dancers and musicians, and the top register shows the festivities of the Vasantotsava. The figures all move in a clockwise direction towards the eastern gateway of the temple. In the lower four panels, a seated royal figure is made to whom the rows of men, women and animals are coming to pay homage. These registers display the power of the king, his wealth, his military forces and his queens. The uppermost register of the Vasantotsava celebrations takes us to a world of pleasure and aesthetic enjoyment. On the inner face of the enclosure wall and on the walls of the Rangamandapa of the Chandra temple are depictions of episodes from the Ramayana. This is the epic story of Rama, an avatar of the deity Vishnu. The friezes have the vitality that was seen in the Mahanavami Dibba carvings. During the 15th and 16th centuries, the robust style of the Vijayanagara carvings was replaced by a somewhat elongated yet elegant figural type. This style is seen in the basement of the Mahamandapa of the Vithala temple and in the gopuras of this and other later temples. These more refined and nimble forms were developed further by the Nayakas in the 17th century. On the southern bank of the Tungabhadra river is a great Vaishnava complex. It is approached through a great bazaar and chariot street, with a tank constructed to one side. Boat festivals of the deities were once held here. The hub of this complex is the Vittala temple, made within a large walled enclosure. This 16th century temple is one of the finest made anywhere in India in that period. A stone ratha, modelled on the wooden processional carts of the temples, is made before the mandapa. It had a superstructure which was visible till the 19th century. This is not a monolithic structure, but is made of carved stones. The 4 solid wheels move on their axles, imparting a sense of movement to the structure. On the plinth of the main mandapa of the temple, there is a fine relief of Portuguese travellers with their horses. However, by this period, the main focus of attention had shifted from plinth reliefs to the many pillars made within the halls. Complex pillars with central shafts and clusters of subsidiary ones were made, often with 3-dimensional leaping animals on them. These rare inglioglyphs with riders emerging from pillars became the hallmark of Vijayanagara art and a source of inspiration for the Nayaka period to follow. The Vijayanagara pillars are carved with a rich variety of forms drawn from mythology as well as daily life. Many of these are very clever compositions. A common pillar motif is the squatting lion seen from the front. The Tiruvengalanatha temple is typical of the late Vijayanagara structures. Its original grandeur can be discerned from its ornate pillars which still stand. The chariot street before it is even broader than that of the Virupaksha and speaks of its former glory. The Lakshmi Narasimha sculpture, carved out of a single rock, symbolizes the spirit and power of the Vijayanagara Empire. This is Lord Vishnu in his part human and part lion form, presenting the majesty and power of the deity. The magnificent depiction is over 22 feet high and inspires awe in the onlooker. It was established by Krishnadevaraya in 1529. This was one of his last great acts of patronage before he retired from active life as a ruler. Another impressive monolithic sculpture of the Vijayanagara period is a massive Nandi. This is made to the northeast of the Veerabhadra temple at Lepakshi. Vijayanagara came into existence under darkening clouds of war. This powerful kingdom and its valiant kings drew a line across the Deccan, beyond which northern armies could not penetrate. Vijayanagara's great armies remained most important, and this changed focus of attention is constantly visible in the art. The great capital of the Vijayanagara Empire exhilarates the visitor. The structures and its art speak of a vigor and a zest for life. Hampi celebrates a period of prosperity and a time of the meeting of cultures. The permanency of stone is for the first time accorded to the basements of palace structures and to pleasure pavilions. The divine themes of earlier sculpture are continued here. However, it is the attention to life in the world, to the present, which marks the art of this exuberant period. It expresses the prosperity and military power of the kingdom as much as the glory of the divine.